Solitude can benefit so many different things, from reduced stress and anxiety to a greater sense of empathy towards yourself. It's essentially self-healing through being by yourself. Many different people struggle with with being in solitude. Many different people love solidarity. I was one of those people, especially after some kind of addiction struggle, and with when you're talking about trauma and PTSD, it's very hard to initially go into being by yourself. For some, for me it was massively, because I was scared about being by myself, essentially. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it and that you can't do it, and that those things are something that you'll never do. It's one of the biggest, for me, it was the biggest plunge of my life, doing that without having healed properly. However, I knew that by going and doing the thing that I knew I needed to do was going to essentially change my life. So today we're going to be speaking about solidarity and reflection, and how I think this is an extremely important aspect of your recovery process, mainly for personal growth and mental well-being. Now, I think this is an extremely important key aspect because it was one of the biggest aspects for me that changed my life completely, as well as a lot of my clients, and therefore I think it's an essential part of everybody's life that they need to go through. Whether you want to go through it or not, I think at some point you're going to need to do it. And I think it's extremely nerve-wracking, and especially when for me, I had loads of friends. I was seeing multiple different women. I was at that point in my life where I just wanted to be around them and stay doing drugs and drinking and doing those things. But actually, I knew that the second I pulled myself out of that hole was actually going to be a time of my life where, being by myself, I was going to understand new aspects about myself. I was going to discover new things I didn't even know about myself, and I was going to become a new person that I didn't even know who I was going to become. But I knew that I was at that point where I was going to turn from a caterpillar into a butterfly. Very, very awful term, but essentially I was at that point of cocooning, and I needed to cocoon, which is the solidarity part, completely by yourself, to be able to turn your life around and change into a more positive aspect. A lot of people that I coach, a lot of people that I know, and for me as well, I made as many excuses as humanly possible to not be by myself and not be in any kind of solidarity, because I knew that once I'd started, it's something that you can't stop. Well, obviously you can at any point. But it's one of those things that I knew once I started, I wouldn't want to stop. And I was slowly phasing into this aspect of my life anyway. I stopped going clubbing quite as much. I stopped seeing my friends quite as much. I started focusing on my life and my recovery and my business a little bit more. But it was that initial, for me, I am a 2 feet out kind of guy. If I don't go head over heels and do something 150%, then I almost feel like I'm not quite going to do that, which is actually not how I advise people to do things at all anymore, because I realized by doing that I did so many things wrong, and I've consistently done so many things wrong, and then I consistently have failed at tasks I set myself and goals I set myself, because I did not break into it properly. I did not allow myself enough time to actually break the water and actually get into where I needed to be. So I needed to break things in slowly, which is how I advise everybody to do things now. How I advise my clients to do things. Don't just start going to the gym 5 days a week if you've never been to the gym before. 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day. You build it up over a period of weeks so that your body can allow time to get used to it. It's the same with our mental health. You can't just expect yourself to be better in a week by doing loads of things. You need to accumulate the things that actually work, and then you build on those things. You build a solid foundation of things that actually work, and then you can build your house on top of the foundations. If you don't have a solid foundation of things that work, you can't possibly have a strong house. So that's probably the biggest common challenge that people face, is that they just go head over heels and just go for it, and then things don't work. That happened with me. I did that. I went traveling and thought, this is it. I'm going to change my life. I'm not going to be the same person that I was. 6 months down the road, everything got on top of me. Work got on top of me. My trauma got on top of me. My PTSD, my recovery. I wasn't doing anything. I was actually going backwards to where I was. I was worse than where I was before I left doing all the drugs, just because I was by myself. Things got even worse. And it's because when I did do this solidarity part of things, I stopped journaling. I stopped doing everything that I had it. So basically, before I left for traveling, I built up a series of things that worked for me. I started journaling. I started filming videos. I started doing loads of things that worked for me. I had a good exercise routine that worked for me to deal with my trauma and allow myself to really focus on what I needed to focus on. I had a good stable job. When I then went traveling, I didn't have many of those things, and I stopped doing everything because I was just excited about being in a different place. And then essentially everything got on top of me because I stopped doing everything that I should have done. And then it's like compound interest. It gets worse as time goes on. And then you just don't know how to unbury yourself out of the mountain of shit that you've got on top of you. And that is extremely common problem. And essentially you have to just do it by piece. And that's exactly what I've done over the past 2 years. So it happens. We get buried with everything that we know we should do and everything that is just making us worse and worse. And then it's a very long tunnel out to get to the surface. In that long tunnel is when you start. So exactly like if you were building a tunnel, how they built tunnels in World War II, they would put support beams every 100 yards, few meters, whatever it was. I'm not a tunneler, but they'd have support beams. And essentially that's what you need to do as well. Where as soon as you're tunneling yourself out, you need to have support beams to be able to support yourself in the things that you're doing, so that you don't have a cave in, you don't have a collapse. And that could be so many different things. That could be journaling, that could be meditation, that could be yoga, that could be Pilates, that could be strength training, that could be daily walks. That could be cold showers, it could be the type of food that you eat, it could be the type of food that you don't eat. It works for you, will work, and you just have to find out what works and how it works and when you do it. Clear, concise plan, having clear, concise goals, making sure that you keep on top of your cleanliness, your tidying, your washing. You don't get buried in the little things that you need to do. It's also extremely common as well, especially in our modern society. So solidarity, like I say, it's one of the biggest things that changed my life, and I think it is absolutely fundamental, important for everybody to do, because it really allows you to have time by yourself to figure out who you are, who you want to be, where you want to go, and what you want to do. When you're influenced by other people, when you have other people around you, you put everything else on the back burner. You don't allow yourself to be put forward, and essentially you have to be selfish. If you don't allow yourself to be selfish, how can you? It's exactly the same rules on an airplane. You need to ensure that if the oxygen masks come down, you put your own mask on first before you put other people's masks on. Because if you pass out, you can't help anybody else, and then you become a hindrance to everybody else. Same rules with your mental health, same rules with your physical health. If you don't put yourself first, in most situations, you cannot possibly help anybody else. And so you need to ensure that you put yourself first. And that's absolutely, and that's okay. A lot of people think that that's not okay, that you need to put yourself first here and there, but you do, and that's absolutely fine. It's not going to be the worst thing in the world. You need to ensure that you are essentially helping yourself as much as possible, so that you can help other people when they need to be helped, and when you're actually able to do so. So as much as solitude really didn't help me in certain ways, because I allowed myself to get buried by all the things that I knew I should be doing, it also did enable me to be extremely creative and really help myself in that realm. I was able to be really creative in how I developed and how I actually did end up tunneling myself out of where I was. I remember 6 months into traveling, I was extremely homesick. I was really struggling with money. I was really struggling with just everything that was going on. And I really didn't know what I was going to do. I was struggling with trying to find somewhere to live. There was loads of different issues that were going on. And again, I stopped doing everything I needed to do for my mental health. I stopped training. I was working. I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I wasn't able to sleep until midnight some nights. It was like zapping my energy completely out of me. And again, I didn't have those tools and techniques in place to be able to deal with my stress, to deal with my anxiety, to allow me to sleep better. And so by forcing myself in that position, I had to find a way to make that stuff work. And that is where the creativity side of things comes from. Because I was forced in that position, I found new inventive ways to be able to sleep quickly and effectively. And the same with waking up. I found new ways to wake up faster and better, and new ways to keep myself focused and keep my to make sure I do what I need to do. Time management was so much better. I was able to really focus on what I needed to do, when I needed to do it, and who I needed to do it for. Granted, I wasn't doing much for myself, but I was able to find new ways and doing everything else for everybody else, which was good at the time, because that's what I needed. Again, I was forced in that position. Eventually, I then started finding once everybody else was sorted and I knew what I was going to do and it just became robotic, that's when I started focusing on myself. Because again, I was forced into that position, and I was being fed up, and I was sick of being sick, of feeling the way that I did. And then that in and out of itself forced me into new practices. I did meditation for the first time. I stopped journaling. I did things that gave me a greater effect in a shorter capacity, because I could sit down and write for hours and hours and hours, and then I would feel a relief. Whereas I could sit down and meditate for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and because of the ADHD, I was able to have 3 or 4 or 5 conversations in the space of 4 or 5 minutes, and it was insane, and I felt so much more relieved because of it. So that was more of an instant relief kind of thing. I was able to put noise cancelling headphones on, sit in a room, and I could do it anywhere. I could do it in the open, I could do it down the park, I could do it in between clients, so it was much more accessible. Again, the creativity side of things, making sure that I was looking after myself, it forces you into that position, especially when you're on your own, because eventually you're going to get bored of watching movies and sitting on TikTok and doing those different things. And especially if you then delete those apps and don't allow yourself to do those things, you go out for a walk, you just become more inventive. Because if you go for a walk by yourself, your brain just starts wandering. You start thinking about things, you start looking at things, especially when you have a plan. And I've spoken time and time and time again about plans and about having goals and about what you want to do and when you want to go, where you want to go, what you want to do and how you want to do it and where you want to be in a certain amount of years. Having those goal-focused ideas always enables you to think about something related to those goals, which is extremely important when you are on your own, because if you don't have those goals, then you're just thinking about nothing and you've got no reason to do anything. So the biggest thing that really turned my entire life around when traveling, after everything got on top of me, so go traveling, so forced myself into a phase of my life where I was going to be alone for, I only thought a couple of months, but it actually worked out being 10 months, nearly a year of being completely by myself. Again, forced myself into that situation to enable myself to grow as a person and become the person that I knew I wanted to be. Again, in previous videos I've spoken about the person you see in the mirror versus the person you see in your head. I was just aiming to make sure that those two people were the same person, and for a short period of time they were. For the first couple of months I was the person that I saw in my head, and I was really happy with who I was and where I was going and the things I was doing. But eventually, like I said, things got on top of me, and then those two different people drifted apart, and I had to then go back on the cycle of becoming who I wanted to become again. And by the end, after I created after I had all these creative moments and creative development moments for other people, for my clients, for my life, and I was able to create these different habits and techniques and tools to be able to to make my life easier, to make my life better, to make me a little bit happier. By the end of my traveling, I was exactly where I wanted to be again. I was much happier, I was in a much better place, I was surrounded by much better people, and it just goes to show that environment has such a massive part to play on who you can be and where you can go and what you can do. And so that was huge, having those tools and techniques in place. And then they followed me all the way home as well, having the right tools and the right techniques in place. And I know every single time I feel bad or I have a lapse in concentration or I feel really, really low, I can go back to those tools and techniques. I can go back to those meditation sessions. I can go back to journaling. I can go back to doing everything that I did in the right way. And I just feel like I was back then. I feel like the two people in my head versus who I see in the mirror are molded together again. And you'd essentially, that's what I find life is about. You're just trying to mold the person that you see in your head versus the person you see in the mirror so that you can become one person. And I feel like that was the biggest pivotal moment, was when I actually understood when those two people came together. Like I said at the beginning, amazing, felt brilliant, best I've ever felt in my entire life. And then again, they drifted apart because of everything getting on top of me. When I then had the right tools and the right techniques and the right systems and the right structure in place in my life, those two people came back together, and again I felt so much better. And so that is again the pivotal part. And then again, a few months ago and recently I've just had surgery, so they have pulled apart again, and again it's just about putting them back together and so ensuring that the person that you see in the mirror is the person that you see in your mind. And that is entirely possible. It's just up to you about how much you take charge in that particular instance. Please share your thoughts in the comments. If you've been thinking about doing some kind of solidarity, or if you've been thinking about going away or changing something massively in your life, and if you have done some kind of solidarity before, let me know how you felt about it. Have you had a similar experience to mine? Was it a lot better than mine? I hope it was. Was it a lot worse than mine, and did it not work for you? And if it didn't work for you, why didn't it work for you? I just want to create a really nice community of people that can actually help each other and can actually offer advice where we're actually able to. But don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I shall see you guys in the next one.